Yeah, can everyone wait, please?
Yay! Yeah, I can see them great now. Woohoo!
Okay, sorry for all the inconvenience. We were having some technical issues. Yeah. I think
That seems to already happen.
So yeah, you can start your presentation now, or if you want to give a bit of introduction of it, that would be good.
Yeah, let me share my screen really quick, and then we'll get this started. Okay, King? I can't see you anymore. So here, maybe I'll move this over here so I can see you. There we go.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, great. So, okay, cool. So I was invited to this meetup, and I'm really, it's awesome that we can communicate the world for letting me up. For me, it's fine. So I might be a little bit groggy, but about React hooks, kind of giving some justification for their existence, look into using them. They're really awesome, and I think that they can really simplify and speed things up. If you don't know me, my name is Kent C. Dodds. I live in Utah, and I have a family. I work at PayPal. I'm Kent C. Dodds everywhere. You might know me from testingjavascript.com. It's a really great resource for testing JavaScript applications. I'm also an egghead and front-end masters. I have the active every week, and then 2 weeks later, my newsletter goes to my blog, which is also pretty active. I live stream every day on YouTube, so if you're interested in JavaScript-related subjects, you can watch my live stream. And I have a 3-minute podcast that I publish every day as well, answers to questions on my AMA. That's on GitHub. So I'll give you a link to this slide or to like this repo later, and you can check out some of these links if you're interested. So I like to start out my talks with expectations. So this talk is going to be an introduction on hooks. So if you're already really experienced with hooks, then you might be a little bit bored. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of code examples. We'll do live coding. I'm not giving you a mandate to rewrite all your apps. The cool thing about React is that it's you're able to iterate to the next version, to the new features and everything. You don't have to rewrite anything to start using hooks. And also a really important note that this is not production code. We're using an alpha version of React. The next version that's released of React will have hooks enabled. So that, I'm guessing, is going to happen next week, which is really exciting. But yeah, keep this in mind. Nobody has written a stable React hook before. And so some of the opinions that we might think that we have about hooks could very easily change. Okay, so with that intro, I want to start out by talking about the why around React hooks. Why do we have React hooks? And I think the best way to answer that question is to ask what makes React so hard. So in my mind, there are 3 things that make React hard. The biggest one, I think, is JavaScript. So I do a lot of teaching of React, and by far, the biggest stumbling block that people have when they're learning React is actually not React at all, it's JavaScript. And so I spend a lot of my time teaching the semantics of JavaScript, particularly classes when I'm teaching people how to use React effectively. Another really critical and difficult piece is lifecycle methods and how they kind of combine concerns of a particular component. We'll look at what that looks like. And then logic reuse is another pain point in React. How do we reuse logic? Now, I've come up with some patterns to make this easier, but we'll look at how that has yet to be perfected as well. So, starting with JavaScript, I want you to look at this code and tell me when you found the bug. First person to find the bug, raise your hand.
Binding.
Yeah, somebody mentioned binding. Yeah, awesome. So this method is not bound, and so what happens when I click on this button is this doesn't reference anything, it's undefined, and so we're calling set state on undefined. That's really weird. Like, I would think that I should just be able to do things this way, but no. If you don't want to use experimental syntax, this is what you have to do. This increment equals this dot increment dot bind this, and now it works. Okay, or you could do this a couple different ways. You could put the bind right there, but then maybe that's not as performant as it could be. My favorite way requires some Babel plugin for special syntax, which is a bound arrow function. What this is basically is just this. Those are functionally equivalent. That's what that's doing. So that's always been a point of frustration. Even experienced developers struggle with knowing when do I bind or when do I not. Like, so if I'm going to do this, equals arrow thing, then why don't I do it here as well, right? And I'll just do that to all my methods. Well, yeah, you could probably do that and you'll probably be fine. But if you're making 2,000 of these, then you're duplicating a lot of the methods, and that's kind of like the antithesis of what classes are all about. And so maybe that's not quite as optimal. But the fact that you have to understand the semantics of these classes and why these problems surface is suboptimal. It'd be pretty cool if we didn't have to understand what these understand these pieces. There's actually another bug in this class component. You can keep looking. I'll give you a second to see if you can find the other bug. But this is another thing that's related to classes that is maybe not entirely straightforward. And the bug is right here. This .props does not exist. And why does it not exist? Well, it's because super is the super constructor of React component is what's responsible for adding this .props, but we're not passing it the props to add. And so to fix this problem, we can say props and updater and forward those on to super. So that fixes that problem. Another way to fix this problem, and this is my preferred way, is to use the experimental syntax again, and this is actually the default constructor. So if you don't have any other contents in your constructor, you can actually get rid of it. We've solved this, both of these problems, but we have to have an understanding of what React or how JavaScript classes work semantically to be able to do this effectively, which is not my favorite thing in the world. So those are a couple of the challenges with React or with JavaScript. Now there are some things that you need to know about JavaScript to use React at all, right? And one of the things that I love about React is how much it kind of forces me into learning JavaScript and being good at JavaScript. When I was using other frameworks, which will remain unnamed, I felt like I spent most of my time learning the framework. And when I decided to switch from the framework to React, there was a lot of knowledge that I had to leave behind because it was all very framework specific. With React, it uses the language really heavily, and so I feel like I'm spending more of my time learning JavaScript than I am learning React. That said, it would be cool if there was less of the weirdness of JavaScript that I had to understand to be able to use React effectively. So that is one of the reasons why I like hooks, and we'll get a look at how hooks simplify this a lot here in a bit. But let's look at another problem. So life cycles. Life cycles are a really great way for you to kind of opt into performing operations during the life cycle of a component. And one of the things that we love about React components is that we can use them to create a black box around a certain behavior. And React components compose together really nicely. But the problem is that it turns out when you have multiple concerns that a component is trying to do, you wind up spreading or mixing those concerns throughout that component. Now the nice thing is that with this chat feed component, for example, once you have it all working, it's a total black box and you can use it anywhere, and it's really nice that way. But the internals of the component are a little complicated because it's mixing concerns. So let's take a look at this. We've got a user context and we're using static context type. Lucky for us, this chat feed only needs one context provider, and so we can use the context type. If we needed more than one, then we'd have to use the render prompt-based API with the user context consumer. But we can use the context type API that was released pretty recently, and that makes this quite a bit simpler. But then we have a bunch of things that this chat feed component is doing. So I'll just show you the app that's kind of inspiring this really quick. So actually, if you go to geo-chat.netlify.com, then you can look at this, and hopefully I've set my my geolocation properly, but we should be able to chat with each other right here. So unless I got my latitude and longitude wrong, because I'm just guessing, but this allows us to chat together. So I can put my name in the username, and then I can view a message. And yeah, and if we're close enough geographically, then it should show us where, oh yeah, sweet, I am in the right place. So I'm faking out my geolocation right here.
So if anyone wants to chat with him, it's geo-chat.netlify.com. If anyone
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, go ahead and see if you can chat in there. But this is the app that we're going to be referencing here in our, oh, thank you, here in our app. And we're going to actually look at the implementation of this here in just a second. So feel free to chat amongst yourselves, and then I'll come back here in a little bit to look at what you're all saying. So with this chat feed, we're going to have a componented mount, and we'll want to subscribe to the feed. We're using Firebase for this. Then we'll want to set the document title because it's going to tell us how many read and unread messages that we have. We want to subscribe to an online status. I actually didn't implement this feature, but you can imagine that you might want to have like a little indicator that shows whether you're online or not. And then subscribe to the geolocation so that you keep your stuff updated, because actually this app, if you were to take your phone and walk around, over time you would change your geolocation and it would change the chat room that you're in. And then component add like page unsubscribe, or we're going to run into problems with memory. Pretty much the object mount, or will restore what you want for the app. We'll unsubscribe from the online status and unsubscribe from geolocation tracking. And then the really tricky thing that I'm not even showing here is the componented update, where you have to compare props, you have to compare state, you have to update your, basically do both of these at the same time. So unsubscribe from the old feed, subscribe to the new feed, and so on and so forth. And so we have a couple concerns here, and these concerns, like the code for these concerns, lives across multiple areas of our component, which makes it kind of hard to take a piece and extract it into a reusable chunk, something that composes nicely with other things. Now with React mixins, we actually could do this pretty nicely, because you just make an object that has all of those things, and then you say, hey, I extend this object, and things worked pretty nicely, but that's not we can't really use mixins anymore. That's a thing of the past. And mixins brought in their own problems where you would have where nicely written mixins still didn't really compose together very well. So we don't really have a great concern composition model for ourselves. And then maintaining an app or a component that mixes these concerns throughout the lifecycle methods can be a little bit challenging. So we do have some ways to share logic, and that's what I'm going to talk about next is logic reuse. But the kind of what we've all landed on as the best pattern for sharing logic is these headless UI components. So these components that don't render any UI themselves, they just handle all the lifecycle methods and then leave it to you to manage the UI. These are render prop components. So this is the state of the art right here, the pyramid of doom of render props. So I'm actually a really big fan of render props. I think that they're but let's start with the main points of render mechanism for using logic. Our React context, which by default allows you to use the consumer, which is a render prop based API, and then we'll subscribe to them with a feed ID, and that'll give us our posts, and we'll subscribe to, or we'll just throw this up to say how many posts we've got, and then we'll subscribe to the online location, and then we'll have this sticky scroller that's responsible for keeping our scroll position in the right place, and then we'll render out our posts, and then we'll also have the post input, and then we'll close off all of those. So this isn't the easiest thing to maintain. Like if I wanted to change the online status to be within the geolocation, well, now I've got to go down here and make sure that's all updated properly. So no, that's not going to work. So it's hard to make changes to really deeply AI. One nice thing is that we can some of these together in a separate component, and then that separate component can have an render prop based API, so it can forward on anything that we're calling, and so then the nesting could be isolated to this other component, and then we just have kind of a presentational component elsewhere, but it still isn't super nice. And another thing is we have this false sense of hierarchy where the subscribe to feed, does that really need to encapsulate the online status, or could I put the online status up here? Like, where do I put these? Which one is more important to be up higher and lower? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to have one over another. So render props are great. I'm really glad that we have them, but it would be cool if we didn't need them. It'd be cool if we didn't need to understand all the intricacies of JavaScript. It'd be cool if we didn't have to mix our concerns in a single component. And these are the reasons why I'm really excited about hooks. Probably the biggest reason is how easy it is to share your logic across multiple components. So with that, now I want to show you the code for this demo. And we're going to look at the old app versus the new app. So what you're looking at right here is actually hooks. And we'll see what this app looks like before we used hooks. So look at the old app first. I've got our app that extends React component. I opted to go for the single component that has all of the logic and state and everything in it, rather than splitting it across a bunch of render-based APIs. So we're seeing pretty big there. So I've got some state. Oops, and that state, it has a username. That username is based off of something in local storage. So yeah, so we initialize that to refresh page, it should remain there. We have our messages. We keep track of which nodes you've seen because did the document title based on that. So if I read every message, and all of them as read. And then we have this state, whether or not you're scroll down to the bottom and push on it, it should lead message. Then let's go to our accessible children. So we can suggest the friend. We'll track whether you're down to the bottom or if you're looking at another message. We'll keep the document. And when we update, we will continue to track the visible children. So we'll say, okay, what children are visible now at this time, up our document title if necessary. And then we need to stick to the container if we are stuck and the messages change, but we're going to scroll down. And if our long then we need multiple Firebase and subscribe to the new Fire chat room for our current app. Let's see, we've got component. So they're all implementation things. And then we're going to untrack them and so fire. Then our out. Then actually, I just got to take the for. I'm more position on it from React functions, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that hopefully a real sense, the whole concerns of putting the title and the Firebase thing and the unread count and things, mixing all those single component, spread the code into multiple places, makes it harder to, because you're not sure the code, relying on what pieces of state. So with that, let's take a look at a couple things and ways inside of the word class is anywhere. We also have one instance of the word bit anywhere in this file. So we're not using classes. We won't have it as life goes. So here, let me go down. I need to move this up to the top. I'm gonna move here. Here is our app, the entire app component. So first we're using use GeoPosition from platform. This is actually written by the same guy who wrote React functions.
Just wait for 2 minutes. We're just switching to another network.
Oh, sure. No problem.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, you can continue.
Cool, great. Yeah, okay, so we've got our app. I'm using the use GeoPosition custom hook. This is not built into React. This is something that actually the same guy who wrote the React function package created the platform, which I think is so great. And so use GeoPosition is actually using another feature in React called suspense, And so to use this, I have to have this suspense fallback. And so when you start, when you refresh the page, you'll see a flash of this loading fallback there, which is kind of interesting, because it'll wait until we actually access the geo position before continuing the rest of this code, which is pretty cool. But with that, I'm going to get my latitude and longitude, and I don't need to attach it to my component instance or anything like that. I'm just literally using these variables in my function. I don't know how it could possibly be easier than that. And then we've got a ref, so we're using the useRef hook. And then we have our state for messages and our username. And the cool thing about this is, again, this is just a variable in my component. So I don't have to use this. I don't have to worry about, okay, where's, like keeping track or binding any methods or anything like that. These are just variables that I use in my my function. And then here I have state for the username. And for this one, I actually provide a